In the loneliest stretch of frozen frontier, where the wind slices like broken glass and even seasoned ranchers think twice before stepping outside, a 90-year-old widow named Elora Hayes lit a lantern and stepped into the dark. She wasn't chasing trouble, she was chasing a sound no one could ignore. 3 newborn foals crying somewhere out in the blizzard. Moments later came another sound, one that can freeze a person straight through. Wolves, a whole pack, moving fast, their howls rolling across the snow like an approaching storm. Most folks her age would have stayed indoors, prayed for daylight, or hoped someone younger would handle it. But Elora wasn't most folks. She tightened her coat, gripped her old ranch staff, and marched toward the danger. Because on this land, a promise is a promise. And those foals, they weren't just horses. They were the last heartbeat of her late husband's legacy. What happened next would become one of the most unbelievable survival stories this side of the Wild West. If you're drawn to true frontier grit, heartwarming animal tales, and stories that remind us what courage really looks like, hit like and subscribe. Share this video so more folks can join us here at WesTtalesas A Down. Every story helps keep the spirit of the West alive. Long before the night the wolves came, long before her name traveled across ranch towns and snowy passes, Elora Hayes was simply known as the Widow of Frost Valley. Folks used the name with quiet respect, not out of pity. She'd earned her place in the story of the frontier the same way the land itself earned its reputation. Through storms, through loss, and through the kind of grit that doesn't fade with age. Elora had lived on that ranch for more than 60 years, tucked deep inside one of the coldest stretches in the American frontier. Frost Valley wasn't the sort of place people stumbled into. You didn't discover it by accident. You chose it, or it chose you. And once it had you, it never really let go. The valley looked calm from a distance. Snowfields rolling like frozen seas, pine trees heavy with white, mountains wrapped in winter most of the year. But anyone who had worked cattle there knew better. Frost Valley tested people. It took strength, stubbornness, and a willingness to mend fences in blizzards so fierce the wind could grind a person's eyelashes into ice. Elora had never complained once. She had been a rancher's wife to the bone. Her late husband, Samuel Hayes, was a tall, soft-spoken man with hands calloused from roping and branding and eyes warm enough to calm a wild stallion. Together they built Hayes Ridge Ranch from the ground up. They weren't rich, but they measured wealth differently out there. Healthy land, strong horses, a herd that respected you. A fire that never went out in the dead of winter. Their pride and joy had always been the Hayes line of working horses. Tough, cold-weather breeds descended from mountain mustangs and frontier stock. Over the decades, that bloodline had become something special. Ranchers from 3 counties knew the Hayes horses could survive winters that killed other breeds. They were small, powerful, and as loyal as the family that raised them. After Samuel passed, the world seemed to grow quieter around Elora. But she never left the ranch. She kept the herd small and manageable, maintaining the land and the animals with the same care she and Samuel always shared. People sometimes asked why she didn't hire help or move closer to town. Her answer was simple. "This valley is my promise," she'd say. And promises don't keep themselves. The winter that would change everything arrived early, riding in on bitter winds from the north. Temperatures dropped so low that even the river slowed to a crawl beneath sheets of ice. Snow piled against doors and fences. The ranch horses grew thick winter coats earlier than usual, and the wolves, always lurking on the far ridges, began coming down closer than ever before, driven by hunger the cold had sharpened. Despite the hardships, Elora found a spark of joy that season. One of her mares, Juniper, was expecting a rare set of triplet foals. Triplets were uncommon enough, but surviving triplets, almost unheard of. Veterinarians in town had warned her the odds weren't good, especially with the brutal weather settling in. Elora only smiled. "Odds don't run this ranch," she said. Heart does. Every morning, she made the slow walk from her cabin to the birthing shed tucked behind a thick cluster of pines. It was the warmest building on the property, a sanctuary of stacked hay, lantern light, and the steady breath of the pregnant mare. Elora talked to Juniper as if she were a longtime neighbor, reassuring her that the valley had seen worse winters and better springs. "You'll be fine, girl. You're a Hayes horse." "Strongest there is," Juniper would toss her head gently as if she understood. As December deepened, the wolves grew bolder. Tracks appeared near the outer fence line, fresh enough to make Elora reconsider her routes at dusk. Sometimes, in the blue hour before dark fully claimed the valley, she'd hear distant howls bouncing off the cliffs. High, sharp calls, not one Volf, many. People in town swapped rumors. Some said a new alpha had taken over the pack. Others claimed the wolves were starving and desperate, driven down by harsher storms up north. A few ranchers reported livestock missing, though no one wanted to say it too loudly. That kind of talk always brought trouble or fear, and frontier folks tried to avoid both. Elora listened, but she wasn't one to scare easily. Wolves had always lived here, so had she. Still, she kept her lantern lit later than usual each night, checking the herd more often, counting shadows twice. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't naive. She simply understood the valley, and in a strange way, the valley understood her. The night Juniper went into labor, the wind shifted. Even the horses sensed it. Their behavior changed, restless but alert, as though something old and instinctive had stirred. Snow drifted heavy across the ranch yard. The moon hid behind thick, bruised clouds. The smell of iron in the air signaled colder weather coming.
Elora bundled up, grabbed her lantern, and pushed open the shed door. "All right, Juniper," she whispered. "Let's bring these little ones into the world." Hours passed in a blur of quiet determination. At 90 years old, Elora moved slower than she once did, but her mind was sharper than ever. She guided the mare through the labor, murmuring calm encouragement, never raising her voice, never letting her fears show even when the contractions grew rough. One foal arrived, then another, then, miraculously, the third. Tiny, shivering bundles with wobbly legs and flickering breaths, their coats damp and fragile-looking. Elora wrapped them in blankets she'd warmed by the stove earlier, then settled them close to Juniper. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Life triumphing in the dead of winter. A small miracle tucked away in a quiet corner of Frost Valley. She stepped outside to get more wood for the stove, drawing in the sharp cold air. And that's when she heard it. A howl. Long, low. Close. Too close. Her lantern flame trembled. Snowflakes drifted sideways as if pushed by something larger than the wind. A second howl followed, then a third, echoing through the pines. Not scattered. Not random. They were circling. Elora felt her stomach tighten. The wolves had come down from the ridge. She turned toward the shed. Inside were 3 newborn foals, barely strong enough to stand. Foals carrying the last bloodline she and Samuel spent their lives protecting. Foals that, without her, wouldn't last a single minute against a hungry pack. She closed her hand around the lantern handle. Fear wasn't the first thing she felt. Purpose was. Because when a valley gives you a promise, you defend it. And when life offers you a miracle, you don't let the dark take it back. The wind carried more than snow that night. It carried intent. Elora stood silent for a moment, listening the way only someone who's lived a lifetime in the wilderness can. In Frost Valley, sound is a language. The crack of a branch. The low rumble of moving bodies. The barely the whisper of paws gliding over powder. You hear enough winters and you start telling them apart. This wasn't just a wandering wolf or a curious scout. This was a full pack moving with purpose. And they were moving toward her foals. She lifted her lantern, its glow carving out a thin slice of gold in the vast blue darkness. Snow swirled around her like smoke. The barn's roof creaked. Horses inside shifted uneasily, hooves tapping the frozen ground. Another howl split the night, closer than the last. Closer than she wanted to admit. Easy, she murmured to herself. Just think, girl. Think. She stepped back inside the birthing shed. Juniper nudged her shoulder anxiously, sensing trouble. The three foals lay bundled in blankets, tiny chests rising and falling as they slept. They didn't know danger had teeth. They didn't know hunger roamed the valley tonight. Elora stroked the mare's neck. I know, girl. They're coming. Wolves taking livestock wasn't unheard of in Frost Valley, but attacking a ranch this close to human territory? That was unusual. Wolves were cautious. Smart. They tested fences and circled cabins, but they rarely pushed their luck unless desperation forced them to. That meant one thing. The pack was starving. Elora's heart beat steady but hard. No time to saddle a horse. No time to call for help. Even if she sent a distress flare, the storm would swallow it long before anyone in town saw the light. She was alone. 90 years old, arthritic in the fingers, half a mile from her cabin. But she'd never backed down from the valley before. She wasn't about to start. The wolves were close now. Their growls traveled beneath the wind, low enough to feel more than hear. The shed walls were thick, but not thick enough to hold off a determined pack. And if the wolves circled from the pines, they could block her escape route entirely. Elora grabbed her old ranch staff, a sturdy length of cured hardwood Samuel had carved decades ago. It had survived storms, avalanches, and enough winter scrapes to become part of her arm. Leaning heavily on it, she stepped back outside. The night had shifted. The air felt heavy. A predator's silence had settled over the ranch. She scanned the tree line. At first, nothing. Just snow. Shadows. The quiet pulse of a dying lantern. Then she saw them. Eyes. Dozens of them. Reflecting the lantern light like droplets of molten silver. They blinked, unblinking, shapes too low and too fluid to be anything but wolves. Some paced between the trees. Others crouched, their bodies long and lean beneath thick winter coats. A massive gray wolf stood at the front, his breath fogging the air. The alpha. Elora had seen wolves all her life, but never one this size. This one carried the weight of a leader, shoulders thick, head held high. His ribs showed faintly beneath his fur, a sign of hunger, but that hunger didn't weaken him. It sharpened him. The alpha stared at her with a look she understood instantly. Move aside. This is survival. She locked her jaw. Not tonight. The alpha took a slow step forward. Elora lifted her lantern higher, using its heat to keep the wick alive. Go on now, she said. There's easier meals up the valley. You don't want what's here. Wolves didn't understand words, but they understood tone. They recognized intent. And right now, Elora's intent was clear as steel. She wasn't giving up those foals. The alpha growled, low and resonant. Snow vibrated beneath her boots. The other wolves spread out, widening their circle, cutting off her path to the barn, to the field, to anywhere that wasn't directly behind her. She'd seen wolves do this to elk herds. It was strategy, not instinct. They were trying to force her to leave the shed unprotected. Smart boys, she muttered. Too smart. She backed toward the shed door, never breaking eye contact. Wolves rarely attacked humans head-on unless they felt trapped or cornered. But a 90-year-old woman alone, injured or distracted, guarding newborn prey? That was an opportunity a desperate pack wouldn't ignore. Her lantern flickered. The wolves shifted at the same moment, sensing the weakness in the light. Hold steady, she whispered. Hold. A gust of wind slammed into her. The lantern sputtered, then went out. The valley went black. No moon. No stars. No light. The wolves barked sharply, excited by the dark. She heard paws breaking through snow, bodies brushing against pine branches, claws scraping frozen ground. Their circle was tightening. But darkness never scared Elora Hayes. She'd raised cattle in storms so thick you couldn't see your own boots. She knew the land by memory, by instinct, by the way the ground tilted beneath her feet. She retreated into the shed and slammed the door shut. The wolves howled in frustration, claws raking the wood. The foals stirred, letting out soft sounds of fear. Juniper stamped anxiously, her breath hot and frantic. Elora lit another lantern, hands steady despite the cold biting deep into her bones. The warm glow filled the shed again, pushing shadows into the corners. She dragged a heavy hay bale against the door, then another. The wolves snarled outside. One leapt and slammed into the wood. The impact rattled the hinges. "Not getting in," she muttered. "Not while I'm here." Her mind worked quickly. She had to think like a rancher, not a victim. Wolves could wait for hours. They could exhaust her. They could force her out by wearing down the door. The shed wouldn't hold forever, especially not against 10 or more hungry predators. She needed a plan. Her eyes drifted to an old iron tool rack mounted near the far wall. From it hung a flare gun. Samuel had kept it for emergencies, though either of them had used it in decades. Elora limped over, plucked the flare gun from its hook, and checked the barrel. One flare. Just one. Would it scare the wolves? Maybe. Would it send them fleeing? Only if they were uncertain enough. Would it blind the alpha long enough to buy time? Possibly. Everything depended on timing. Elora tucked the flare gun into her coat pocket. The wolves slammed against the shed again, harder this time. Wood splintered. The foals let out soft, desperate cries. Elora held her staff in one hand, the lantern in the other. Her breath came out slow. Measured. She knew what she had to do. Protect the foals. Face the wolves. Not in the dark. Not in the shed. Outside. Where the valley could witness it. Where Samuel would have stood. She pulled the hay bales aside. Snow rushed inward through the cracks. The wolves sensed movement, their growls sharpening. Elora gripped her staff. "This valley is my promise," she whispered. Then she flung the door open. The blizzard roared. Wolves lunged forward. The alpha's eyes locked onto hers. She stepped out into the storm. The storm swallowed her instantly. Snow crashed sideways across the ranch yard, thick enough to blur the pines and the fence line into shapeless, shifting shadows. The cold bit into her face like tiny needles, but Elora kept moving, staff forward, boots digging through drifts that rose nearly to her shins. The wolves exploded into motion as soon as she stepped outside. Their shapes were quick, fluid, ghost-like in the storm. Most wolves hunt with silence, precision, teamwork. But desperation changes creatures. Hunger sharpens instinct into something raw. The alpha burst through the snow first, his massive form a streak of gray muscle and power. He didn't leap at her, he circled, testing her, reading her movements. His pack followed, darting in and out of the storm like flashes of living shadow. Elora pivoted to keep them all in front of her, staff raised, lantern swinging to carve a circle of fragile light. Any other person might have panicked. But she had lived 90 long years out here. She had raised mustangs, buried friends, and weathered storms that could peel bark from trees. A pack of hungry wolves wasn't going to shake her. "Easy now," she whispered through clenched teeth. "I ain't here to die. Not tonight." One wolf darted toward her left side, testing a weak spot. Elora swung the staff hard. The wolf yelped and veered away, its paws skidding through powder. Another wolf dove low from the right, jaws wide. Elora stepped back and cracked the staff against the snow, sending up a spray that startled the animal just long enough for her to regain footing. The alpha growled, annoyed. He could see she wasn't going down easily. Elora lowered the lantern to the snow. She needed both hands free. The flame sputtered but held, a small burning heart in the storm. Her breath came in white bursts. Every muscle in her back screamed. But her eyes stayed sharp. "You'll have to get through me," she muttered. "And I'm old, boys, not done." The wolves shifted formation. Two moved behind her, attempting to cut her off from the shed. Another pair stalked her front. The alpha remained dead center, wide stance, tail low. A leader ready to strike. Her heartbeat didn't quicken. Instead, something inside her settled. She'd been in danger plenty of times before, though never quite like this. But fear wasn't what guided ranchers. Survival wasn't what shaped pioneers. It was resolve. The snow thinned for a breath of a moment, just enough to reveal the pines behind the wolves, and something else. A narrow path she hadn't noticed earlier, half covered by drifting storm. Away toward the main barn. And if she could reach the barn, the foals would have a chance. The horses inside could be roused. Wolves fear a stampede, even a small one. She just needed a distraction. A moment. 1 second of confusion in the pack. Her hand slipped into her coat pocket. The flare gun. Samuel's old emergency flare. She glanced downward at the lantern, its flame steadying her. "Guide me one more time," she whispered, though she wasn't speaking to the lantern. Not really. She lifted the flare gun skyward. The wolves didn't know what it was. But the alpha sensed danger instantly. He stiffened, growling sharply, commandingly. The pack paused. That moment, that tiny heartbeat, was enough. Elora pulled the trigger. The flare erupted with a crack so loud it punched through the storm like cannon fire. A spear of sizzling red shot into the sky, streaking upward and igniting the snow around her in a burst of violently bright light. The wolves recoiled, startled, yelping as the flare hissed overhead. The alpha staggered backward, blinded, shaking his head as the burning light carved through the storm clouds. Elora didn't waste the moment. She lifted her staff and charged forward. Wolves scattered in a burst of confusion. The snow churned under her boots as she pushed through their shifting forms, her lantern kicking up sparks of gold against their coats. One wolf tried to recover, lunging at her side. She swung the staff with every ounce of strength she had. The strike connected with a thud that echoed across the ranch. The wolf tumbled away, stunned but alive. Elora kept going, chest burning, breath ragged. "Move, girl," she muttered to herself. "Move!" The flare sizzled far above, burning like a red star against the storm. The faint light helped her see the path ahead, a curved line through the snow toward the barn doors. Shelter. Tools. Rope. And maybe a miracle. But the wolves weren't retreating. They were regrouping. The alpha recovered first. He lifted his head, letting out a furious howl that spiraled through the storm. The pack snapped back into formation instantly. Their hesitation was gone. The flare had bought seconds. Nothing more. Elora stumbled, knees threatening to buckle, but she forced herself upright. She was close. Too close to stop. The barn's massive doors loomed ahead, dark wood outlined by drifting snow. The wolves charged. She turned. In the storm's haze, she saw them as streaks of dark motion against pale earth. Their paws hammered the ground, bodies low, jaws wide. The alpha led the attack, cutting through snow like a blade. Elora tightened her grip on the staff. "Come on then," she whispered. "Let's finish this." The first wolf leapt. She swung upward, catching it under the jaw. It crashed beside her, rolling through the snow. Another wolf came low. She kicked downward, using her heel to block its bite. The alpha lunged last. He was faster. Stronger. Too strong for her to block head-on. He barreled into her side, knocking her off balance. Her staff flew from her hand and disappeared into the snow. She hit the ground hard. Pain tore up her shoulder. The storm spun around her. The alpha loomed over her, jaw opening, breath hot and foul in the frozen night. His eyes weren't cruel. They weren't evil. They were desperate. Desperation drives even good creatures to violence. Elora lifted her arms, trying to shield herself. She braced for the bite. Then a sound shattered the moment. A deep, booming neigh. Powerful. Furious. Close. The barn doors burst open behind her. A massive dark horse charged out into the blizzard, mane whipping like a banner. It was Thunder, her strongest stallion, awakened by the flare, the noise, the foal's cries. And Thunder was not afraid of wolves. He slammed into the alpha with the force of a rolling boulder. The wolf was hurled sideways, skidding through the snow. The pack yelped in shock as the stallion reared, hoofs striking the air, carving a protective circle around Elora. Thunder lowered his head, snorting hard, daring the wolves to come closer. For the first time all night, the pack hesitated. Elora crawled backward, using the barn wall to lift herself. Her breath shook. Her vision blurred. But Thunder's presence steadied her. She knew horses saved people sometimes. Stories told it. Ranchers witnessed it. But seeing it, living it, was different. Thunder pawed the ground, muscles coiled like steel cables. The alpha rose slowly, shaking off snow, eyes locked on the stallion. The pack looked between their leader and the towering horse. The flare still glowed faintly in the clouds, a dying ember of hope. The alpha growled once, then turned. The pack followed. One by one, they disappeared into the storm. Thunder snorted triumphantly, stamping the snow. Elora exhaled deeply, sliding down against the wall. "Good boy," she whispered. "You saved us all." But the night wasn't finished. The wolves were gone, for now. The foals were still in danger. And the storm was worsening. She pushed herself up, leaning heavily on the barn door. "Come on, Thunder," she murmured. "We ain't done yet." The storm broke over the high desert like a ripped curtain, spilling thunder across the mesas. Buck Eden rode straight into it, coat snapping behind him, hat pinned low. The air tasted of metal and dust, the kind of air that meant endings. He had spent 12 years drifting from border towns to mining camps, never waiting long enough for anything to catch him. But something always did, and today it had a name, Cain Dallard. The stallion beneath him, Jasper, seemed to feel the man's resolve. The horse's muscles coiled tight under rain-slicked hide, each stride a hammer against the soaked earth. Buck leaned forward and let the rhythm set into his bones. This was the last pursuit, he knew it. One way or another, the desert would tell him what kind of man he had been. Midday shadows pooled under the cliffs when Buck reached the cut in the canyon, the only pass wide enough for riders. Lightning forked overhead, and for a moment it lit the wreckage of a camp. A half-burned cook fire, tracks scattered in panic circles, the torn canvas of a wagon. Buck dismounted and knelt, running gloved fingers through the trampled mud. 3 riders, he muttered. 2 heavy, 1 light. Heading north. The lighter prints belonged to Lily Vance, the one person who had ever pulled him off the outlaw's trail. She had taken a job as a schoolteacher in Clearwater Bend, but trouble had a long reach. Dallard, once Buck's partner, now his shadow, had discovered she knew where Buck was heading. And Dallard never left a loose thread. Buck stood slowly. His jaw tightened, and a memory flickered. Lily on the porch of the schoolhouse, soft sunlight on her hair, saying she believed he could be more than the life he carried behind him. He hadn't believed her then. But after seeing what Dallard had done to the camp, he wished he had. The storm rolled east as Buck mounted again, giving way to raw heat rising from the earth. He pushed Jasper into a hard gallop down the canyon. Hours passed. The cuts in the land grew steeper, the river below louder. In the late light he spotted smoke curling from a bluff ahead. Dallard's camp. He slowed Jasper to a walk, letting hooves fall soft on the sand. From a ridge of boulders, Buck could see 3 horses tied to a strip cedar. A man leaned against a rock with a bottle, half asleep. Another was poking through saddlebags. And there, bound but upright, Lily. Her face was streaked with dirt but unbroken. When she lifted her head, Buck saw the flash of defiance he remembered. Dallard emerged last. Taller than memory, leaner, wearing the same wolfish grin that once charmed half the territory. He held a shotgun casually over his shoulder. He spoke to his men, and they laughed. Something cold slipped into Buck's chest. He slipped his rifle from its scabbard. He set the stock against the stone, sighted down the barrel. The wind stilled. Breath in. Breath out. Thunder cracked, not from the sky but from the rifle. The guard with the bottle dropped without a sound. Dallard's head snapped up, and Buck let the rifle fall as he swung into the saddle. Gunfire erupted. Jasper surged forward, hooves striking fire from the rock. Buck rode straight through the clearing smoke. One of Dallard's men fired wildly. Buck leaned low and felt the round whistle past his back. He fired twice from the saddle. The second gunman toppled. Dallard grabbed Lily, dragging her behind him toward the ridge. Buck steered Jasper at full charge, leaping a fallen log and sliding to a stop between Lily and Dallard just as the outlaw spun with the shotgun. "You never could leave well enough alone, Buck," Dallard said, voice scraping with anger. "Let her go. Always playing the hero in somebody else's story." "You wrote this story," Buck said. "I'm just finishing it." Dallard fired. Buck moved faster than thought. The blast grazed his coat, sending shreds of fabric spinning. He fired once, hitting Dallard's shoulder, spinning him backward. The shotgun fell. Dallard rolled, scrambling behind a boulder. Buck advanced slowly, revolver ready. "Come out," Buck said. "You're done." Dallard laughed, bitter and breathless. "You think this ends with you riding into some clean new life? Men like us don't get endings. Just more dust. You chose this road. If I hadn't, you would have." Lily called Buck's name, voice sharp with fear. Dallard lunged from behind the rock, knife in hand, a predator's final gamble. The blade flashed. Buck fired point-blank. The sound faded slowly into the canyon. Dallard sank to his knees, surprise etched across a face that had never expected to be outplayed. He fell onto the stone, breath leaving him in a long, trembling sigh. The storm's last grumble echoed overhead as if marking the moment. Buck stood very still. Lily approached him carefully. He holstered the revolver and met her gaze. The hardness in his eyes softened, just a fraction. "You came for me," she said. "I should have never left you to face him alone." "You didn't leave," she said. "He came looking." Buck exhaled. A long, tired breath that felt like the end of a 12-year sentence. Jasper nudged his shoulder, sensing the quiet. Lily touched his hand, and for a moment Buck felt the world steady. But the badge pinned to her coat caught his eye. He frowned. "You working with the marshals now?" he asked. She nodded. "I wired them after he took the children hostage in Clearwater. They'll want to know the threat's gone. They'll want your account, too." Buck looked at Dallard's body, then to the horizon. "My account's long and mostly unpleasant." "Then shorten it," she said. "Tell the truth, that matters. You saved lives. That counts for something." Buck considered the battered horizon. He had ridden across half the frontier trying to outrun what he'd been. Maybe it was time to ride toward what he could be. "All right," he said softly. They gathered the horses and started down the canyon. The sky cleared to a pale gold, sun dropping low like a closing curtain. Jasper walked close to Lily's mare, the two animals settling into an easy rhythm. As they rode toward Clearwater Bend, the desert wind carried the faint scent of sage and promise. For the first time in a long while, Buck Eden felt the weight on his shoulders ease. Not gone, but lighter. Manageable. The kind of weight a man could choose to carry instead of run from. Behind them, the canyon swallowed the final echoes of gunfire. Ahead lay a long road, but one worth taking. And Buck rode on.